Hello everyone, I'm Kevin, otherwise known as 4BX257, here to bring you another 1980s G.I. Joe tour review. And today I'll be taking a look at the G.I. Joe's Jetpack, the 1982 Jump, which stands for Jet Mobile Propulsion Unit. Kind of odd seeing as it's based on a rocket pack, but whatever. The Jump makes its first comic book appearance in the Old Mobile comic run of G.I. Joe in issue number 1. And makes its first animated appearance in the 1983 Sunbow animated 5-part miniseries, G.I. Joe: A Real American Hero, better known as G.I. Joe: The Mass Device, in Part 1. But for the 1983 year, they actually dropped this, and we got this. The Jump with a figure. Now I consider this a completely different item because it's actually numbered a completely different item than the first year. This one came with Grand Slam, better known as Grand Slam version 2, or to collectors, Silver Pads Grand Slam. And then this was never issued in 1984, making this a 1-year only G.I. Joe accessory, very rare. Now Grand Slam himself is better known as the Hal Cannon Gunner, and that was released at the same time as him being in this package. Grand Slam himself makes his first comic book appearance in the very first Marvel comic, G.I. Joe number 1, just like the Jump, but he has never, ever shown throughout any of his appearances flying the Jump here. And unfortunately, he makes no cartoon appearances. Taking a look at the Jump Jetpack's playset, it comes with a Launchpad and the Jetpack itself. It's a relatively small playset. Here's a 3 3/4 inch figure just to give you a sense of scale. Not very big. I'll start off with the main event, the Jetpack itself, which you can remove from the Launchpad. The Jetpack itself is, well, just a backpack. There are no moving parts, no removable parts. Well, that is if you consider the blaster to be part of the set, which some collectors do, at least for this version of the Jetpack. As you can see on the bottom, there is this hole right on the bottom of the middle section here, and that's where the cord for the blaster pegs in. And as you can see, it just has a regular back peg, which can fit on a number of different G.I. Joe figures. The cord for the Jetpack is unique to its set. It was never reissued to anything else, I don't think. These little plugs on the ends are permanent portions of this actually kind of hardish plastic cord here. As a matter of fact, it just kind of wants to go straight at every opportunity. Like I said, hole in the bottom there, just plug this portion in, and plug the other side into the included blaster. The blaster is a very, well, unusual sci-fi little piece here, with this clip which goes around the wrist of a figure, but it also has a proper handle and a little sight, which means that this blaster is only meant for right-handed people because, well, that's a angled sight piece. On the bottom, we have a little hole there, and that's where this end of the plug goes. And like I said, some people actually consider this to be a complete Jump Jetpack. And here it is mounted on a not so random figure here, complete with the blaster. And again, this cord is threatening just to pop right out just because of how stiff it is. And now to take a look at the Launchpad portion of the Jump Jetpack. And a lot of future releases that Hasbro had of the Jetpack usually did not come with the Launchpad itself. Rather a shame because this actually makes a really nice background diorama, whether or not you're using it with the Jetpack or not. It seems like a lot of really small dios and things like that could really use like these little military green platforms. But one nice thing about this is that it has this nice little painted ring here for the landing and launching pad, and that is actually painted on there. It's very rare that these early G.I. Joe toys would have painted on features, but this one does. I'm actually kind of grateful because it really does give you the impression of a landing pad. Because if that were stickers, you know, a kid would probably not place them in correct order or not even symmetrically like it is like here. Now, as for the features of the Launchpad itself, it has these raising and lowering legs here. So you can lower all 4 of the legs or raise them up, depending on what type of terrain you're actually putting this thing on. So it actually is quite level. The Launchpad surface itself has one little foot peg here, so you can keep your figure on there nice and steady. One very interesting thing about this is the console, because the console is well removable. The console has these little clips here, and the Launchpad has a kind of an outer frame, so you can actually put this and clip it on anywhere along here on any side. So you can just kind of slide it along there. It really depends on how you want to display this thing, which is really quite nice. The detail on the console itself is also quite nice, with all like a little simulated key buttons there and little monitors. Quite nice. But the main reason that you have this console on here is to store the Jetpack. The Jetpack goes on this little hole right there on the other side. The console also has this little holster portion here. And again, I have sort of detached the hose from the Jetpack because this is just so stiff. And you can either put it forward like this, where the sight is sort of behind the Jetpack if it's in the way there. And I think that this is the way it's meant to be, because the cord should always still be attached, theoretically, to the Jetpack like this. But I kind of like putting it like this myself, so I'm not knocking that sight into any portion of this, even though either way is perfectly fine. And again, here is a random G.I. Joe ready for liftoff. Now, would you believe me if I told you that back in 1982, this was the least favorite offering of any of the G.I. Joe accessories at the time? Now, this was a $5 price point toy. Now, at the same time that this was issued, we also got the flak, as well as the Ram motorcycle. A lot of consumers didn't see the whole set here. They just saw, well, this. The meat of the Jetpack is just a backpack. For the same $5 price point, you're getting a backpack and maybe this little blaster. And you're saying that this is the play pattern that you're going to use versus, you know, this large cannon or a multi-use motorcycle. Of course, this isn't going to be very popular if you rank it like that. One thing I always find kind of funny when I read lists of G.I. Joes, and the very early lists on 1982 accessories always has the Jump Jetpack as being too sci-fi or impractical for the G.I. Joes. And to that I think, well, they clearly don't know what the origin of this particular device is, because they have things like the Ram here, which is based on a Honda, which the American government would never use. And of course the flak, which is based on a German World War II anti-aircraft cannon, which again the Americans would never use. However, the Jump Jetpack was based on the Bell rocket pack, something which the US Army actually requested to be built. And here you can see an example of just how similar the Jump Jetpack is to the original Bell rocket belt. It's just missing the handles for controllability and the center cylinder, which would mix the two types of fuel together for its rocket propulsion. Again, it's very strange that they didn't use the sort of the rocket designation and went with jet. Here's an example of an actual jetpack with the huge intakes on the side, which ironically enough remind me of something from the 1970s G.I. Joe Adventure Team accessories. They would have something very similar to the actual jetpack and not the rocket pack. Now, the US Army originally invested in this, but the result was something which could only fly for about 20 seconds, and you can hear this thing coming from like 3 miles away. So obviously the US Army put a halt to that. One other very fun thing to note is that this thing not only actually flew, but actually flew on film, and a lot of people really don't realize this. In the James Bond movie Thunderball, James Bond, in the very beginning of the movie, actually rockets away in one of these things, and the scene is not CGI, it's not wire work. There is an actual person really flying that thing on film. That is really crazy. So Hasbro makes about 1 million of these things, and they're really not going off the shelves the way the other items in the G.I. Joe range are. To use a collector term, they're sort of peg warming. So what does Hasbro do in order to actually sell this thing? Well, they do what they've always done since the 1960s with the G.I. Joe brand, is that they add something to this thing to add perceived value to it. And what they add is a figure. Say hello to Grand Slam version 2, or Silver Pads Grand Slam. If you look at the instruction sheet for the original versus the 1983 version, you'll see that there is only one change. And that is right here on the instruction portion, where the original says the figure is sold separately, and on the new version, which always came with Grand Slam, that portion is removed. And that's all there is to the differences between the instruction sheets. So with a figure added to the set at the same price point that the two other more popular sets without figures, you would think that this would be really popular. But I think it was only popular maybe with consumers, and that's when consumers could even find this thing. Because I don't think it was very popular with retailers. Retailers still had the old versions without the figure on their shelves, and they still had to price it at the same $5 price point from which, you know, they originally bought it for. Hasbro's metallic paint application is notorious for rubbing off, and this version of Grand Slam is just covered with silver paint, which on the aftermarket you'll see that he's almost always has some damage somewhere. Even something straight from the package will always have damage because they would rub up against the inner driver bubble. They weren't like they weren't really secure like modern day action figures are in their packages. They were kind of loose a little bit, and he suffers from that, both on the front and his knee pads there, and even on his back where you might not really see. And while it is fairly easy to repair this, well, I guess like modern like acrylic silver paints or enamel silver paints like that, fairly easy to repair that, just covering it up on his chest on the knee pads again. Sorry, thigh pads, I should say. It's really difficult to repair the damage done to the ones on his arms because they have like a sort of a swoopy detail on the arms sculpt itself. So it's not really as symmetrical and sort of easy to get away with painting over some damage as you would on the other parts of his body. If you consider the jump jetpack and the blaster to be part of the playset accessories, Grand Slam himself still came with his own unique accessories, mainly his helmet and his visor. The helmet is the same dark green plastic and the same mold as the first version of Rock and Roll's helmet, as well as, well, obviously the first version of Grand Slam's helmet, as well as the visor is the exact same one that you get on the first version of Grand Slam, as well as several other G.I. Joes, such as Flash and Short Fuse from the same years. The version 2 Grand Slam's file card is really no different than how the very first version was. They just changed his title from Laser Artillery Soldier to Laser Jetpack Soldier, and then added some little line about the jetpack down here. But all this is exactly the same as his original file card, which is not surprising that Hasbro would do this. They did that for the Viper Pilot as well as Grunt for the Falcon Glider, and I think the Clutch version 2 was also exactly the same as his version 1 file card, with just the updated portrait and the title. On a personal note, Flash is one of my favorite G.I. Joes of all time, so to have Grand Slam, a variant of the same Flash body style, is something that I always wanted in my collection. Of course, I really like the first version because the orange is sort of a match to the Flash, but this silver version is a really nice variant. As a matter of fact, I first saw this on the playgrounds. I had no idea that this figure even existed, and somebody on a playground brought in his G.I. Joes like we all did back in the day. And I was like, wow, that thing looks really different, but I recognize the body style from my favorite G.I. Joe. So I finally tracked this thing down years later because, well, being in Canada, this thing was issued very, very infrequently. If you thought the American version was rare, try finding a Canadian version of this thing. The Jump Jetpack is supposed to represent the rapid-to-launch, easy-to-use by any G.I. Joe air mobility device. So the only thing that I can really think of as being its successor is the 1984 Skyhawk, something which itself was sort of designated as easy to operate by any G.I. Joe, and it is a VTOL aircraft, meaning that it should be rapid to launch as well. As far as opposite numbers to the Jump Jetpack on the Cobra side, there are really three picks. First is the 1984 Claw, a light aerial glider, which was actually jet-powered as well, as I believe, as well as the 1985 Trouble Bubble Flight Pod. However, as far as something that's actually designated as a jetpack on the Cobra side, that would be the 1987 Cobra Jetpack. Well, it didn't have any fancy name, strangely enough. And as it was issued in 1987, I would actually consider it to be more of a rival to good old Starduster here, rather than the original Jump Jetpack, even though the Jump was a mail order from around 85 and onward, so you could have bought these at the same time, theoretically. Grand Slam had a successor with the 1987 Starduster figure. In his original comic, it sort of makes it out like he is the very first of these jetpack troopers trying out an experimental jetpack, whereas this is just the old jetpack from 1982, without any stickers on it. As a matter of fact, this is the only way that this was issued. If you find stickers on it, they're probably from the first two releases or the mail-away versions of the Jump Jetpack. The entire Jump Jetpack set would be made available through mail-away throughout the 1980s. However, just the jetpack itself would continue to be used, first with the Starduster issues through mail-away, as well as the 25th anniversary line would have the jetpack being used there, of course with the backpack modified for those new and different figures. The last time the actual set was issued was in 2007 for a G.I. Joe convention. Interestingly enough, it was a 2-pack with modern versions of Grand Slam and Starduster. If you're looking for a Jump Jetpack on the aftermarket, they're actually fairly easy to find, complete with all of our parts. And for, I wouldn't say a reasonable price, but they won't break the bank either. There are just two things that you do have to look out for if you're looking for the standard version like this. And that is, the scope on the blaster is very easy to crack off, so you need to make sure that that's there, and you need to make sure that you have the unique hose that goes with this set. However, if you're looking for the 1983 version, well, good luck to you, because that is one of the most expensive versions of a figure that you can get. Silverpad's Grand Slam is a very, very rare figure to find, with all of his original paintwork intact. As a matter of fact, he will come with a helmet, which goes with the dark green of his uniform, as well as a visor, which, again, the visor is a very small accessory and is often missing with versions of any of the figures which came with that. Well, that's all the time I have right now. Please check out my Facebook page for more information and behind-the-scenes photos for these reviews. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for next time to see another 1980s G.I. Joe toy review. See you then.